Hi, so this next participant of this project, I am so excited about. She is one of the original royal families of the country of Kashmir. So she is a princess in real life. She is a founder and the executive director and CEO of Kashmir World Foundation. And it is an international nonprofit organization that uses art, science, and technology to address human and wildlife issues around the world. She also is an innovative inventor and educator, and she made it her mission to commit to return to help the needy families back in her country by creating her Al Kareem Foundation. But she wanted to empower people to help themselves. And this is where Kashmir World Foundation came in. So I'd like to introduce Mrs., if I could, Princess Aliyah Pandolfi. Welcome, and thank you so much for doing this. So, Ms. Pandolfi, I understand that your upbringing, you were influenced by your realtor father. Tell me, how did that influence you as far as going into helping others, going into aviation? Tell me a little bit about that influence.
It is interesting. I actually come from no background in aviation or engineering or even technology. My dad was actually a diplomat, and I moved here when I was like 3 years old. So I did grow up here, but I think when I was growing up, I did have a chance to travel a lot. And in that traveling, I had an opportunity to see the difference in the quality of life that we have in the United States compared to some other countries. And I think, from a very young age, to me, it was like, I want to grow up to do something that would help people. And I think it started with, I want to be a doctor so I can help. Right. And then as I got older, and I'm like, I don't know, I can't really stand the sight of blood. I faint. So that's not going to really work. My dad, once he retired from the embassy, he ended up getting into real estate as a hobby. I enjoyed it because it gave me an opportunity to learn to work with a variety of different people, different types of houses, different types of communities. I learned contract law. I learned people communication. I learned marketing. And then I eventually ended up teaching real estate law, principles of real estate. So I kind of made it through, and I knew my goal was to retire at 30 from real estate. And I ultimately wanted to get to international real estate, and I did. So my last project was in Dubai, and then I was kind of done. I was like, I'm done. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something that I'm really, really passionate about. And at that point, I didn't even realize it was animals that I was really passionate about, or technology, or education. So it was kind of interesting. I had gotten my cat Chico from Costa Rica, and he helped me meet my husband, Ron Pandolfi. And the rest is really history. And I think to me that was like a sign from the universe saying, okay, this little furball helped you find the most important person in your life who is going to kind of help me through everything that I'm gonna accomplish in life as well. So with that, to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I want to help endangered species. Luckily, my husband also loves animals as well. So together, we just kind of started looking at revamping the foundation to say, well, how can we still do what I want? Because I know I value education, and my dad was a big proponent of education, right? It's like, that's one thing nobody can take from you. You could lose your money, you could lose your house, you could lose your reputation, you could kind of lose everything in life. But the education that you get for yourself and you actually understand, nobody can actually steal that from you. So I think, to me, that really impacted my long-term view on the best thing I can give someone is education, right? I think, when I can educate a student or a individual with anything really, it will help them decide and choose what their life should be and what direction they want to head into. So I think for me, education became kind of like the center of what I wanted to do. And then bringing in Chico, my cat, was like, okay, I love animals, and I didn't realize I loved animals so much. And then having my husband have worked with endangered species, and he worked with scientists from around the world. In the early 90s, he founded a network of scientists and engineers that would contribute their skill sets to kind of help endangered species with technology sources. So that group is called the Technology Assisted Counter Poaching Network. So lucky for me, I kind of inherited a lot of brains from around the world. And I was like, wow, I'm like literally sitting on a gold mine of brains, knowledge, and passion for wanting to give back. So I feel like, that was kind of like the start and then the evolution of where I ended up in creating Kashmir Wool Foundation. And I think that answers your first question before I jump into the rest of it.
No, it absolutely does. And actually, it is so, I guess it's so encouraging because I did not have an aviation background either. My story is not a gold mine, such as yours, but it's actually encouraging to know that you don't necessarily need that aviation background. You can have that passion and desire to learn more. And if that's something that you decide to do, then you do it. And so I love that. So thank you. Now, your thing, though, is very different from some of the other people we've interviewed. You are actually taking on drones. So I would like to ask more about how the drones came into play. I mean, was it from the foundation that your husband was already in network with? Were they the ones who decided to come up with that idea?
So it's actually a interesting story. I was actually on an interview with somebody else. This is back in 2000, I think 12 or 13, early 2013. And I think, the question came about like, well, what do you want to do? If you could save any animal, who would it be? Or what animal would it be? And I'm like, well, it would be the snow leopards. And they're like, well, how would you do that? Because it's like the mountains, the Himalayas, the terrain, it's a really tough terrain. Now, the reason why I chose that is because my cat, Chico, was a Himalayan cat, domestic cat. But, that kind of went back to the Himalayas and then the snow leopards and that they're endangered. And they're like, well, how are you going to do that? Because there's scientists and engineers or science conservationists that have been working in the field. And, what would you do that would be different? And it was interesting because I was like, well, the way I would do it differently is, well, what's a view that they don't have that we can create? I've always been a fan of Leonardo da Vinci's and flying. That was like my one wish. If I had a wish when I was a little girl, what do you want? I wish I could fly. So I was like, well, what if, we were able to use drones? And this is early when drones started becoming a little bit commercialized, but still prior to like the big commercial launch. So I was like, I probably want to use drones to give a new perspective because the only way to evolve and change is once you have new information. You can't change with old information. So I would use drones to be able to do that. And then I wanted to take it a step further because I was also learning about like artificial intelligence and the makerspace movement at the time. And I'm a big person on output versus just input. So I think, taking all of those collectively kind of gave birth to an idea that was just like, sounds crazy. And it was crazy at the time. And I realized that it wasn't going to work for the snow leopards because of my background, because of the conflict in the area. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going into Kashmir with drones. It's not going to happen right now, right? This is back in 2013. But that same year, like literally, I think like 2 or 3 months after that interview I gave, President Obama passed the executive order to counter wildlife trafficking, specifically focused on rhinos and elephants in Africa. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a challenge, or this is kind of like a real problem. Even the president's taking notice of it. So I don't know anything about drones. I know people that know about drones. I don't know anything about AI. I don't know anything about rhinos. I don't know anything about conservation or counter poaching, but I think it would be great if we could get people from around the world to help find a solution, because I don't know how to solve this problem. And that's when I launched the Wildlife Conservation UAV Challenge. And at first it was crazy, and I was the only kind of woman in the group at the time. So we had people that were on the presidential committee that was created to counter poaching, and they were like, "That's kind of like crazy that you think that you would invite people from around the world to participate in a challenge to help save rhinos. And it's not possible. You know, what you're asking for is not possible." And I'm like, not right now, but I think somebody needs to look at it, and I think it will be possible. So I did have a little bit of resistance, maybe a lot of resistance, but I will say my husband was like always there. He's like, "You got this, go ahead, I'll support you." And the counter poaching technology assisted counter poaching network, those guys were going to support it as well. So I went ahead and I learned how to build a website, and I was like, I've got to launch this on October 1st. It was crazy. And then all my connections just started coming together. October 1st, we launched the Wildlife Conservation UAV Challenge. And the second day or the first day, Popular Science picked up on the article and published it, and then it went wildfire. We had teams from all over the world submitting entries into the challenge, and I didn't even know what all the requirements were going to be. So it just, I mean, it literally went wildfire, and it was just an idea. It literally was an idea like 2 months before it started, and then wildfire around the world. And I think a big success factor was you had students and people that were makers, right? Or they were getting a degree in aerospace engineering. And this gave them an opportunity to apply what they had learned to a real challenge or a real problem, right? And it was like, wow, we can help save these animals. And wouldn't that be great? Me as a technology person, or you as a technology person, we could come together and we could take our skill sets and build something that might help us save the rhino. So it was really a call for help. I think for me, it was reaching out to the world, and the world responded. We had teams from every single continent, and from like small teams to big teams to guys to girls to young kids to older adults. I mean, it was like no restrictions, and I think that's what made it successful, because I feel like you can't put restrictions on creativity. You can't put restrictions on inventions, right? Because they could come at any age. It doesn't matter. It could come from anybody. And I learned during that period of time, a lot of the really talented teams came from places that didn't have all the technology. I mean, the United States was probably, the teams from the US were probably kind of like the bottom tier compared to teams from even Africa and India and Europe. I mean, the US was really lagging behind. And that was kind of another like red flag for me. And I can get into that next step of how the next version of what I did evolve.
You said so many different nuggets in there. You said so many different things. You said things that said that even though you had the resistance, it wasn't necessarily based at first, based on what you just said, on you being a woman. It was your idea and thinking that you can have the people around to do this, to help you around the world. But yet you had the support of your husband, the team, and Chico. Yes. We all need cats. We all need cats, I guess. I'm allergic. Maybe I'll stop sneezing. But you kept plowing through. You didn't give room for excuses to saturate and grow. So that's the first thing that I'm hearing. And then as it went on, you're continually telling me that there were no bars, there were nothing, no limitations or categories that you were specifically hiring in. So it wasn't that you needed more women, you needed more women, people of color, you needed more, it was just, what you got? You're talented? Come on in. You're talented? Oh, you're passionate too? Come on in. And that is actually so that is what makes it so wow and goose pimply. So I know our viewers are going to just be completely inspired because I am.
Oh, thank
So,
you.
so no, thank you. So you were saying that the US was lagging a little bit behind. And I do want to ask about the project that you made to counteract that. And then after that, would you please touch upon how this pertains or how it even transitioned into more of a sustainable aviation, if you would?
Sure, absolutely. So, like I said, what I want to be very specific about what I learned from this. The challenge was to design a drone that could find poachers in the African bush, right? And then the action item would be we want to be able to stop them before they would kill the rhinos. So what I was doing was also innovative because I wanted real-time detection for this. It wasn't like I wanted somebody somewhere else to be sitting there viewing the videos and processing that data and saying, oh, I think we see some poachers. Oh, we should send somebody out there. My goal was, no, I want this on the edge. Like now we have the word AI on the edge, but it didn't exist back then. Real-time processing. And that was the thing that distinguished what we were doing from a lot of the other drone organizations that were out there, is that we were looking at processing that data on board the aircraft. So that way, the rangers can actually take action to stop those poachers. So what that created was an opportunity for interdisciplinary education. STEM was a big word, and it's still a big word in the US, and it's, popular around the world as well. But in a way, like, you ask kids, they could tell you what it stands for, but when you ask them, well, what does it really mean to you? Well, that's when they kind of start hesitating. And I'm like, well, I'm not really sure. So, what I essentially did was I created an interdisciplinary project with a mission, a real mission, right? So, you have aviation. So, you have students that were part of getting degrees in aviation, or they were hobbyists, or they were small companies just launching. And then you had computer scientists that were challenged at the same time. And it's like, wait, we have to now create a model that allows us to detect the poachers in the African bush, right? So we have to team up with somebody that has the aviation skills, but we also need somebody that has computer science skills. And then you take it to the next level of that integration. You need engineers. How are you going to merge this together? So now you've got the hardware, you have the software, and that has to come together. And one of the biggest challenges in terms of sustainability, I recognized early on conservation organizations that I work with are nonprofit organizations. They don't have millions of dollars. They don't have thousands of dollars to be spending on equipment. So one of my major goals for the challenge was, well, we've got to make sure the drone costs less than $3,000. And it has to do all these things. And it was like, that's mind-boggling. How is that even possible? That's nothing, because at that time, the cheapest drones maybe are $25,000, $50,000, $100,000. And guess what? You fly them, crash, and where are they going to go? They're going to sit on somebody's bench. That's it. And on top of that, there was no intelligence. They can't think, right? They weren't drones that was self-aware, that were capable of processing that data. They were literally recording a video feed. Somebody would have to bring that drone back and then watch the feed and say, oh, there were poachers over here. Oh, that was like 6 hours ago, for example, right? So now all of a sudden, it's like, okay, you want somebody that can build a drone, that can do the AI, and then you want them to be able to fuse this data along with other sensors, because we're going to be flying at nighttime. We have to have some type of night vision, infrared, or we need some kind of thermal cameras. And there are lots of challenges you have to start thinking about. So what I did was I helped teams around the world create an interdisciplinary project. So I had a lot of teams for universities that participated as well. And they were also responsible for getting their own funding for the teams. What was really exciting about that is you saw these amazing videos that the teams created. You saw this amazing like marketing materials that the teams created. The Kickstarters and the GoFundMe kind of websites started being launched because of the project as well. So these teams were able to get funding and actually execute and design, develop some of the drones, even if they weren't like 100% what I had thought, but I think, that it sparked the idea that this is possible. You can do it. And then the other big part that I became involved with was education. Because remember, that was one of my key things that I stand for is education. So for the teams, our sponsors, they directly gave stuff to the teams. So we had, for example, 3D printing. We had a company that sponsored to, if you have a design and you want to 3D print your drone, we're going to give you a 10,000 grant. We'll print it for you and we'll send you the drone. We had, for example, there was OpenVSP, which is like a software created for designing aircraft. And it's open source and it was designed by NASA. So we had them participate and say, okay, we'll support teams that are willing to use the software. And then they also did all these webinars, these educational webinars, which allowed teams from around the world that might not have had any knowledge on 3D printing or CAD or OpenVSP or a bunch of solar cells and a bunch of other technologies that were evolving at that time as well. So it gave the teams an opportunity to hear from the experts and also reach out to them if they wanted to integrate any of that stuff into their drone projects. So I think, it created this interdisciplinary education of a real project. And then some of the teams ended up spinning off and creating their own small companies and like in their countries and doing well. And then going back to what I recognized, the teams in the US, they were really good at designing the aircraft, but the computer science, the understanding of this has to be real time. I mean, it has to be real time processing. That wasn't integrated into it. So I was like, I've got to change this. I have to find a way to educate our students and help them get back and be able to be competitive in the world. So I was like, I don't know how to build a drone, but if I'm going to teach, I better learn. So I just literally designed a curriculum and I was like, okay, we're going to go through this and we're going to build a drone and we're going to teach people how to build a drone. Like I said, I was very fortunate because I had some really amazing people by my side that were helping with creating and what do we need, what are the different components and everything. And this drone that you see right here actually is a drone that my daughter built. And her first drone she started building when she was 5. So I started working with her and she started learning about the parts and the components and everything. So literally you get pieces of components and in 4 days you are going to build, program, and fly this drone. And it was, once again, kind of crazy. Like, how is that going to be possible? How are you going to do that? And I'm like, I don't know, but we'll go with the flow and see how it goes. And I did it. We partnered with Microsoft and we were teaching at their facility for a couple of years. And it was, it was amazing. Unfortunately, I couldn't teach as many students as I wanted to. So I was like, okay, maybe we could create a program for teachers. So we created a program for teachers. A teachers take flight, and then that way those teachers can take the curriculum back to their schools and teach their students. And then going back to the sustainability of the project, as I said early on when I started the Wildlife Conservation UAV Challenge, I understood that if you have a drone and you're somewhere in the middle of the forest in Kruger National Park, for example, and something breaks, what are you going to do? You're just going to put it on a shelf. So from that, one of the important lessons I learned is I have to empower and teach the biologists and rangers that are using these tools. So that's when I took my Build a Drone workshop and kind of revamped it and created a program for conservationists and rangers. So where they learn to build, program, fly the drone, and then ultimately they have the capability of customizing it with AI as well. And this way, if something breaks, guess what? They can fix it. And the other part, remember I was talking about the cost. It's not going to cost a whole lot. Maybe like $4 or $5 for a frame that's going to break, or $15 for a motor if you have to replace it, propellers a couple of bucks or something like that. So I think, for me, it was important to be able to create a program that was sustainable, both in the ability for the people to fix and get it back in the field, but also where it was cost efficient. They can easily afford to purchase products that were broken and replace them. So now, they're learning skills, they're empowered, they're educated, and they can keep going on with their projects without having to just shelve one of the $20,000, $50,000 drones that they've purchased.
So this is helping with your mission, though, to actually in real time, these conservationists, these park rangers, they see the poachers, and in real time, this allows them to go to the poachers immediately. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So the whole purpose of the project was really to create a drone that can find that has a path that it's going to follow, right? And then if it detects something of interest, in this situation, let's say it's poachers, then it can alert the rangers on the ground of where the poachers are and what's the best route for the closest rangers to be able to go and intercept and stop them before they get to the animals. And then we could also add like non-lethal weapons on the drone, such as, like, let's say just a simple speaker saying, "We see you," or a flashing light saying, "Here you are, welcome, and now you're visible in this flashing light. We've got your photo, and this drone is talking to you, and you're scared to death. You don't know what else it's going to be able to do." And surprisingly, over from 2013 when we launched the project to 2020, the poaching numbers did go down by 64%.
This is amazing. So if someone wanted to be on your team, then how can they contact you? We're speaking to college age students as well as high schoolers and anyone else who comes through the museum to see this. How can they contact you to be a part of your team?
Well, they could definitely go to our website, which is www.kashmirworldfoundation.org. And we have a phenomenal internship program. This summer, I had 27 high school students that were interning with me, and several of them will continue into the fall. And then I've had over 700 interns through the life of our project, and they can work on a variety of different things. I mean, like I said, you don't have to be a technology specialist to be an intern, because we have to communicate and we have to share our stories. So for example, we have a video game division now, so we're working on making a video game about our projects. And then we have animations. Last year we launched a animation about snow leopards, and it was done all by interns all over the world that were part of that team. We have a communication team where, same thing, interns from all over the world. They're the ones doing our social media. They're the ones that are kind of creating this new activity book that we've created. The first one was about sea turtles. The second one's on snow leopards, and then we're going to create our rhino book as well. And it was an idea from one of my interns in Brazil. She was like, what if and she was just a 10th grader when she started interning with me, and we were thinking of, well, what can you work on? And I was like, you have the freedom to create something that doesn't exist. And she's like, well, what do you think about an activity book? And I'm like, that sounds like a great idea, because this way we can get to younger kids, right? Like second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade students, and they can work through the activities in this book, learn about the challenges the animals are facing, but also the solutions that the technologies are being able to create to help save these animals as well. So she helped create that by having all of our different artists create the book. She kind of put it together, and she also ended up launching it at her school before she left, and now she's at UC Berkeley getting a marine biology degree.
Oh my gosh. So I do want to ask then, do you also have the drone making set for younger children? Or I know you just said that the how to build the drone was for the conservationists and park rangers, and I saw it on your site. So would I be able to get one for myself and for my daughter and actually build one myself?
Yes. So we do have drone kits. So we have a quadcopter drone kit, and we also have hexacopter drone kits. And one of the goals is for us to actually go back and start working on our workshops as well. So I mean, I would love to partner with the museum, and maybe next summer or something we could do a workshop, and students from around the world or around Oklahoma can attend as well. But yes, we do have drone kits that are available on the website. And it's challenging to start out by yourself. So I would love to kind of create an online program. And I've worked with people all over the world, like from Kenya to Uruguay, virtually trying to create the drones. And it can get challenging because you have your hardware and you have your software, and then you can have limited internet in certain areas as well. That's why we like to go in person and do the teaching and at least get it set up for them. And then that way that allows the community or the group to be able to carry on once we're gone. And then we can provide the technical support via internet after that, once we've kind of helped them set it up.
Princess Aliyah Pandolfi, you are just amazing. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time and answering this. I love your project and your mission, and I know that these students are going to be just as excited as I am to even hear this and get to know this this mission that you're doing and find a way to participate. So I just want to say thank you so much. Is there any last words that you would like to give the students?
I would just like to say pursue your passion. And sometimes it's hard to know what you're passionate about. But I would say when you generally feel love for something, probably a good indication that you could be passionate about it. Like I said, growing up, I didn't have any technology background, and I also didn't have a cat or pets. I never even thought about a cat when I was a kid, as I want a cat. I knew I was like, oh, I want a dog, but I never thought about a cat. And here I was in another country. I'm like, oh, this little cat's so cute. I think I'll
Cheeto.
get him. And he is world famous. I tell his story all the time. But I think the point here is for students, don't be afraid to try new things that you haven't tried as well. Because I think, sometimes it's our fear that holds us back from leaping in and trying something new. So I would encourage explore and investigate and just find some good mentors, because there's so many adults that would love to help be mentors for students that are passionate about a particular cause. So I would just reach out, email, even if someone's a CEO, just email them and say, hey, I'm a fifth grader and I really want to learn more about fuel cells. Do you think you can tell me a little bit about fuel cells? I bet that CEO will respond.
Okay, gang, you heard her. This is the princess herself. She said, go for your passions. Thank you so much for this time and enjoy yourselves.
Thank you.